Nobody will look for you here.
Look, there's a warrant out for me. A Navy ship could come through here any time.
What can we do without a boat?
Hello and welcome to another bad movie review. This time we're looking at She Gods of Shark Reef. This was filmed in 1956 and released in 1958. Runs about an hour and 3 minutes. And it was directed by legendary B-movie director Roger Corman. Now with a staggering budget of $50,000, it's kind of surprising what they were able to pull off here. Because this was filmed in 2 weeks and it was filmed back to back with Naked Paradise, which is something that Corman was known for doing. If he's going to go to an exotic location, he wants to make the most of it and try and milk it for 2 movies or more. Now, they were hoping for a mainstream release, but that did not happen. Instead, this was double billed with Night of the Blood Beast, which was probably not just a double feature, but also something that was largely done at drive-ins. This is also the acting debut of Durant, who was a singer in the 50s. He played Jim alias Lee Johnston. Now the film stars, as I said, Durant and Bill Cord, Lisa Montell, Ed Nelson, who had a bit part, and Jeanne Gerson, Carol Lindsay, and Beverly Rivera, but most of the other actors were largely unknowns. Now it shows that this had a small budget. Apparently it was filmed at the Cocoa Palms Resort, where they used a lot of the buildings that had the thatched huts, and that's pretty obvious from a lot of the doors and things like that. So the premise here is that 2 men had apparently gone to this wharf and run into a couple of guards. One of the guards gets killed and they have to run away real fast. We don't really find out what that's all about until much later in the film. But one of the guys flees to his brother who has a boat, and they decide to go and try and flee to this location a little further out where this guy can get some refuge, and that's of course Lee. So the brother, whose name is Christy, and he's called Christy for a few minutes, and then he's called Chris for the majority of the film. Whatever, doesn't matter. They get shipwrecked on this island because they didn't see this reef and they went to avoid it and ran into some coral, and then they got stuck in the water and they were rescued by some ladies who are pearl divers apparently. So with their schooner gone and most of their supplies, they're kind of stuck here, and apparently there's a supply ship coming in about 10 days and they're going to be rescued then. And this island is run by exclusively women who are ruled over by this matron who in the credits on IMDb is called Queen Pua. I don't think they ever said her name in the movie. If they did, I blanked out during that part. Now Chris mentions that he saw a statue in the coral, something there among the coral, and we get to see it. It's a statue of their shark god, and the matron explains that the gods have been angry with them. So the men recover what they can from their ship, which is not very much at all. Then there's some singing and dancing. We get a little bit of a luau, some hula dancing, and one of the girls, Mahia, she obviously is taken with Chris, and she gets him up to dance, and he accidentally breaks his lei that she puts on him, and that is apparently a bad sign, so everybody runs off. So these guys meet the women of the island, who apparently are all pearl divers, and they've got their own company called Island Company. Put a lot of work into that one, didn't you, Roger? Now with the supply ship supposed to pick these guys up in 10 days, they're a little worried about getting caught because of course Lee is wanted for the murder of that guard. Now with the breaking of the lei, things are not looking too good for our protagonist because the islanders seem to think they're cursed or something. I don't know, it's not very clear, but they're bad juju either way, and the matron seems to think that Mahia may also be somehow tainted by her love of Chris. Mahia explains to Chris that the shark gods are angry because Mahia saved Chris, and they smooch. They get caught smooching later by the matron as well because, you know, once you start smooching, you're going to smooch for several scenes. That's just how it goes. You start walking along and smooching. Next thing you know, everybody's looking at you, and that's a big old no-no for the matron. Meanwhile, Lee finds a hidden boat on the island. I don't know if it's actually hidden or just washed ashore. Who cares? It doesn't matter. They find a boat. So in this thinly written plot, the matron is mad at Chris because he's smooching with Mahia, and now it seems that their last dive for pearls didn't find anything, so they're upset about that as well. And the matron appeals to Kangaroa, who's the shark god, but it appears the shark god is unhappy, so there has to be a sacrifice. sacrifice. A purification sacrifice. And we learned that I2, which are the spirits of the dead, are also unhappy because they didn't get Lee and Chris. And I guess that Mahia thinks that Lee is supposed to be with the I2. So there's going to be a ritual sacrifice. And 3 bound girls are thrown into the reef for the shark to consume. But Chris does not like that. Mahia is one of them, so he saves her, which enrages the matron even more. And he saves her on a surfboard. Where that surfboard came from, I don't know, but he got a surfboard, and you can see the brand name on it too, so it's an actual surfboard and not some nonsense Islander crap. He found a surfboard somewhere. So he saves her, then they make a makeshift mast for this boat they found, but they get spotted by the matron, and that's when they find out that the police are going to be there by morning, and that's all the time they have to escape, so they decide to take the matron hostage too, or the queen, whatever her job is. They don't really say. She's in charge. So they take her hostage, and they're going to take her with them. So while they're hiding out at the reef and the matron escapes, Lee goes back to the island to steal the pearls, and of course this leads to a fight, and then all sorts of nonsense happens. We get a cool underwater fight scene, and the movie ends with a fairly predictable ending. Overall, this was not the worst waste of an hour and 3 minutes I've ever done, but it's definitely not Roger Corman's best work. I can see why a main distribution company did not pick this one up and they had to put it in the double build features, because this was an incredibly weak film. The script is very, very thin. There are a few fight scenes that are pretty well done at the beginning of the film and a few later on. Underwater fight scene was really well done, and all the underwater shots were well done. I know there's some stock footage of sharks in here, but the movie's so short, it really doesn't have time to overdo it with the stock footage or anything like that. It didn't have to force all that stuff in, so it wasn't playing for time overall, and that probably works to the movie's benefit, because if this had gone on any longer, I would have fallen asleep. It's not a terribly exciting film, but like I said, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's just kind of not a action movie, it's not a romance movie, and it's not a horror movie, but there's a few elements of all of that in here. So I don't know what the target audience for this was, but I don't really think they cared too much, and it does show. Now, unfortunately, this movie also has a lot of audio problems because they're filming so close to the water. You get a lot of the sounds of the ocean breaking on the reef or on the shoreline, and it's really, really loud in the audio. So there are times where lines are kind of garbled among the water sounds. Also, it's very, very difficult to find a high quality print of this movie because most of the prints that survived were really low end. This was not a popular movie even in the 50s, so this was more of a drive-in special or a double bill feature, and it's not something that anybody thought to preserve. It is one of the more obscure Roger Corman works, and there are definitely a lot of the Roger Corman elements here. Scantily clad women, the guys bare-chested, and the kind of ludicrous sequences that occasionally happen in a Roger Corman film. But overall, it was just kind of a forgettable throwaway film that doesn't really fit anywhere in a specific genre, and the premise is kind of silly. So I'm not going to recommend it unless you're a diehard Roger Corman completist and you want to add it to your collection. It's just not memorable in any way. The acting isn't bad per se. They're all B-movie actors, and Lisa Montell was in both She Gods of Shark Reef and Naked Paradise, and she does a fine job, even though she talks very much like a stereotypical Islander with very broken English, but the queen doesn't have that problem so much. So there's a few inconsistencies there, but the acting's fine. The script is thin, and there's a lot of beautiful setting of the islands, which was probably the selling point. The fact that this is in color, but the print quality is so bad, you'll think it's in black and white for parts of the film. If you could find this on Blu-ray or something like that, try and get the restored version. There is one out there. It's just very hard to find and kind of hidden among the others. A few streaming services seem to have decent prints, but most of the time it's going to look like you're watching a very out of focus 1980s TV broadcast. So good luck finding a really good copy of this one. Maybe someday it'll get a high quality 2K or 4K restoration, but I won't hold my breath on that. So unless you're a diehard Roger Corman fan, I'm not going to recommend this one for you. It's just not that interesting or memorable. It's not even hilariously bad. It's just sort of like a TV episode of something from the 50s and seems kind of out of place with any category you really throw it into. Like I said, there's a romance story, but that's really not the focus. These two guys are on the run, but that's really not the focus. I don't really know what's going on with this movie. It was just thrown together to create a film so they could market it and get 2 movies for the price of 1 real movie. And it shows. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.